Hi, my name is Joel Comiskey, and I'd like to talk to you today about making the transition to the cell-based church. Now, there are three stages of a successful small group-based transition. The first one is the pre-transition, and we talked about that in a prior video. In this video, I want to talk about the transition itself and the post-transition. Now, basically, in making the transition, I noticed there were two ways to do it. One I called the go for it approach. For example, when Sergio Solorzano returned from South Korea visiting the Yoido Full Gospel Church in 1986, he asked all of his smaller church plants to come together and form one large cell church. And they just went for it. They just became a cell church. But Sergio Solorzano there in El Salvador in the Elim church, he had a lot of authority. He was the founder. And so the go for it approach only works when the founder of the church is doing it. And really, there's not the same process that takes place when you just start a bunch of groups together. But I did notice that this was a way that some cell churches went about the transition. However, if the church has been around for a while and the pastor is number 2, 3, or 4 in a line of pastors, I think it's much better to do what I call the model approach or the pilot group approach. Now, let me explain. A pilot group starts with the pastor gathering together leaders and then actually modeling a normal cell group. Now, let me give you an example. In 2019, my wife and I left our church plant in Moreno Valley and we joined the New Beginning Church in Los Angeles. And we're still part of the pastoral team there. And Moses and Ingrid, they wanted us to help them transition to the cell-based church. And there were about 18 leaders or so that Moses had been preparing. And so Moses said to me, why don't we just start 6 groups? And I said, Moses, it's probably better that we start a pilot group, that we model what we want them to do. And so we met together with these leaders first and did a little training. And then we talked to groups of 4. And we said, hey, would you be willing to lead a small group after the pilot group in these teams of 4 people to make sure that, they were compatible, they were in agreement. And so we put together about 5 teams of 4, and then we started meeting in the pilot group. And we started in Moses' house, and we met there for 2 months. And then we rotated among these various team members in their houses just to be able to discover how they open their house, how they arranged their chairs, how they treated children in the group. And that was very good to rotate among the various team members' houses. But we actually modeled a regular cell group. So we started with a icebreaker, something dynamic. When you were 7 to 12 years old, where did you live and who was your best friend at the time? Things that are that open up people's hearts. And then we'd go into worship, the worship time. And we usually would use a YouTube video sprinkled with praise and prayer. And then we do the lesson time based on the pastor's message. But we would use 3 key questions. Number 1, what does that passage say? Number 2, what is God saying to me through the passage? And number 3, how can I apply this passage during the upcoming week? We'd always read the passage, have a time of silence, and then go into the question. And by the way, I have another video on how to use the questions in the small group. Make sure you see that video. And then finally, we would break up in prayer groups. At the very end, we'd have a time of debriefing. And we'd always start with, hey, what did you like about the group? Lots of praises. But then we'd offer suggestions so that all the future leaders could say, okay, I could do this differently. I could change this. And this pilot group went on for 9 months. And so everyone really understood how to listen, how not to preach too much, how to be a facilitator. And they really got it. And so when we multiplied 9 months later, we went 9 months in February 2020, we multiplied to 5 groups. And it was interesting, just 1 month later, COVID hit, COVID-19. And so we closed down everything, but these groups were strong. And we continued to meet, we continued to multiply. In 1 year, we had 10 groups, and then in the next couple of years, we multiplied to 14 groups. And now we're back face-to-face groups. You know, by the grace of God, God allowed us to do it right, modeling what we wanted those other groups to do and to become. Now, let me just share some pilot group principles. Number one, when you pick those people to be in the groups, they need to be committed to eventually lead their own groups in teams. So make sure that each one that's in the group has that commitment to stay in it for the long haul. Number two, that even though it's important to evangelize, you go out and you reach out, but the fruit of that evangelism doesn't come back to the pilot group. So it's not really a cell group per se, because you're just trying to model. You can still evangelize, but then you bring the fruit of those who you won to Christ to the new groups when they multiply. The other thing is that after the multiplication takes place, I think it's good that the lead pastor continues to lead an open group, to stay in the battle. For example, Moses and Ingrid, they still lead an open group. Celise and I continue to lead an open group. That's important. After the groups multiply, then you say to the entire church, okay, get in one of those small groups. And that's what we did. Now, then you're in the post-transition time, where you're perfecting things. You're perfecting the details of the cell church. You're perfecting the supervision. You know, the lead pastor is coaching those new leaders. But eventually, when you have like 10 new leaders, you want to make sure that there are other supervisors, so that the lead pastor is only coaching the supervisors and they're coaching the rest of the cell leaders. The other thing is to perfect the equipping. You know, we want everyone in the church to go through the church-wide equipping and eventually to become a team member in a cell group. Now, I think it's important that you realize that the equipping is not the cell lesson. The cell lesson is based on the pastor's sermon, those 3 questions I mentioned. The equipping is on another night or another morning. For example, Sunday morning before the worship service, you can practice the church-wide equipping, or on another night. And then the details. I love it when a church has a map of all the cell groups in the church, so that people can find where they live and get involved in a cell group, and the bulletin and so on and so forth. In my book, Reap the Harvest, the 2022 edition, I have 3 chapters on making the transition. And also in the Joel Comiskey Group website, there's lots of resources on transitioning to the cell-based church. God bless you. If you like this video, please click on like and subscribe to our channel, but also check out the resources on our website.